Every year, millions of Americans gather around tables filled with food, share what they are thankful for, and celebrate what they believe is a story of peace and friendship. What if I told you that story is a myth? A myth built to cover up one of the darkest chapters in this country's history.
You know what's wild? Every year, this country tells the same story: pilgrims, peace, and pie. Like it was some sort of miracle of unity. But that's not what happened. Thanksgiving wasn't a feel-good dinner. It was a turning point. The moment that kindness got repaid with blood. Let's start there. The pilgrims didn't land on empty land. They landed on land where people had already lived. They'd already built and farmed for thousands of years. And most of those people, the Wampanoag, had just survived the pandemic that the Europeans brought. You dirty heathens. It wiped out entire villages before the Mayflower even showed up. So when those starving settlers landed in 1620, they weren't saved by luck. They were saved by mercy. The Wampanoag taught them how to live off of land that wasn't theirs, how to grow food, how to fish, how to stay alive. And that's the part they love to tell, but only half of it, of course. The first Thanksgiving wasn't even called that. It wasn't a holiday, it was a tense peace meeting. Two nations sitting down, both knowing that it could go bad at any moment. And for a while, it held until the settlers wanted more. Greedy bastards. More land, more control. Then came the broken treaties, the stolen crops, the forced conversions. By 1637, English colonists had killed over 700 Pequot men, women, and children, burnt them alive, and then held their first day of official Thanksgiving to celebrate the massacre. That's the part the textbooks leave out. That's what they dressed up in paper hats and called gratitude. The Thanksgiving that we know now, that didn't come until 200 years later, during the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln needed something to pull the country together, so he made Thanksgiving a national holiday in 1863. He wasn't honoring peace, he was manufacturing nostalgia. A story to distract a broken nation from how violent it had always been. And over time, that story became comfort, because it's easier to celebrate a myth than face a massacre. It's easier to say we were all friends than admit what this country did to survive. That's how America rewrites pain, with parades and prayers. For Native people, Thanksgiving is not a celebration. It's mourning. It's about loss, survival, and the refusal to disappear. Every year, Indigenous families gather, not to give thanks, but to remember. Because the truth didn't vanish with the tribes that they tried to erase. It's still here. They are still here. So yeah, eat with your people. Love on them. Be grateful. Make sure to do land acknowledgments. But don't pretend that this day was born out of peace. It was born out of blood. And a lie so big they built an entire holiday to cover it. The real story of Thanksgiving isn't what they told you. It's what they didn't want you to know.
Hi guys, my name is Esther Daniel and you're welcome back to the channel. So the truth is, that Thanksgiving narrative we teach today, this warm, family-friendly meal, was crafted generations later to mask colonial violence and created a national origin story that felt good to white Americans. But feeling good doesn't make something true. Now look, nobody is saying you can't enjoy time with your family. Nobody is saying food, gratitude, and togetherness are bad. But what is harmful is ignoring where this holiday came from and what it still represents to people whose land this country was built on. But let us quickly see how others are reacting to this issue, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like and share the video to help the channel out.
This is just a reminder that Thanksgiving is a colonial holiday. Indigenous people are still here. We were not met with a peaceful feast. Our people were raped, murdered, and almost annihilated. Indigenous nations from Canada, the United States, and South America are still here protecting their land and resisting this oppressed nation. Don't just honor the history, honor the original people and land. Thank you.
Sit!
Wait,
What?
we cannot break bread with you.
Huh? Becky, what's going on?
Wednesday! You have taken the land which is rightfully ours. Years from now, my people will be forced to live in mobile homes, on reservations. Your people will wear cardigans and drink highballs. We will sell our bracelets by the roadsides. You will play golf and enjoy hot hors d'oeuvres. My people will have pain and degradation. Your people will have stick shifts. The gods of my tribe have spoken. They have said do not trust the pilgrims. Especially Sarah Miller.
Gary, she's changing the words.
And for all these reasons, I've decided to scalp you and burn your village to the ground.
The more and more I read, when people celebrate different things, and then I know the history, like the true history of stuff, once I start digging, I get a little bit cringed, right? Because America loves to sell us the soft, family-friendly version of Thanksgiving. But the real history is brutal. The real history is brutal, we know that. And the part they never teach is what indigenous people and black people were living through at the exact same time. Because while schools teach pilgrims and pretty tables, the truth is, Thanksgiving sits right at the intersection of indigenous genocide and the rise of African enslavement. So when the first so-called Thanksgiving happened in the early 1600s, indigenous nations were already fighting for survival. Colonizers were taking lands, spreading disease, breaking treaties, and waging wars that wiped out entire communities. Excuse me if I say this name wrong, y'all. The Pequot Massacre in 1637 slaughtered over 700 indigenous men, women, and children. The next morning, the governor declared Thanksgiving Day to celebrate it. That's the foundation the holiday sits on. But here's the part that shocks me the most. Well, I don't think we can be shocked. Just surprising we found it, right? Indigenous people were being unalived and displaced. Black people were being forced into the very same system, right? African people were already being captured, chained, shipped across Atlantic, and sold into colonies to work the land that had just been stolen from indigenous nations. One group pushed off their land, another forced to labor on it, and the colonizers celebrated both moments as victories. Whew. The early 1600s, those Thanksgiving years, were when slave codes were being written, where whiteness became legally tied to freedom, and when blackness became tied to enslavement. Black women's bodies were used as forced breeders. Black men were being auctioned. African families were being torn apart, and while all of this was happening, they were throwing feast and calling it gratitude. But here's what they never, well, here's what you mostly don't hear. Like, both communities were resisting. They don't talk about that part either. Africans were escaping plantations, forming early maroon communities, and teaming up with indigenous nations for protection, for trade, and survival. And indigenous nations were fighting back, refusing to disappear, rebuilding, adapting, surviving. Two groups targeted by the same system, living two different sides of the same oppression. So no, I continuously feel cringe about that, saying the Thanksgiving part to somebody. Not when I know it was built on indigenous massacre and black enslavement, happening side by side. Not when the holiday glosses over the trauma our ancestors faced, so this country could feel patriotic in November. Knowing all of this, let me ask you something. What would Thanksgiving look like if America told you the truth?
Do not wish me a happy Thanksgiving. Let's not do that. I know you mean good, but please do not wish me a happy Thanksgiving. Let's not do that. Thanksgiving was nothing but a setup for genocide. That's all it was. A strategy for the Native Americans to drop their psychological guard so the European could genocide them, steal their land, enslave their people, and pass diseases into their community. It is a contradiction for American Africans with all we've been through. Having suffered the worst human tragedy in history, it is a complete contradiction for us to turn around and celebrate with the white man the genocide of the red man. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say it again. It is a complete contradiction for African people, especially American Africans, to celebrate with your oppressor their extermination of the red people. how they gave the red people diseases and enslaved them, significantly reducing their population, stealing their land, giving out false treaties. Please don't wish me happy Thanksgiving. Please do not wish me happy Thanksgiving. If you're celebrating today, you're celebrating the genocide of the Native Americans. You could cut the cake however you want to cut the cake. You can slice the cake however you want to slice the cake. You can bake the cake however you want to bake the cake. If you're celebrating today, you're celebrating the genocide of Native American peoples. I will not be party to that.
This is a turkey, a symbol of the US holiday called Thanksgiving. But the true story behind that holiday isn't what many people in the US are taught. If you grew up in the US, the myth that you probably learned is that English settlers and indigenous people shared a friendly harvest meal in 1621. But that version leaves out almost everything that actually happened. The story usually begins with English colonists arriving in modern-day Massachusetts. They were unprepared for the winter, so indigenous people showed them how to plant corn and other crops. Then the settlers invite their indigenous neighbors to a feast to celebrate their first harvest. But that's not the real story. The truth is, autumn harvest traditions didn't come from English settlers. It was already a part of life for many tribes, including the Wampanoag, the indigenous community that lived on that land long before the settlers arrived. At the same time the first Thanksgiving appears in US history books, English settlers were stealing land and crops and spreading deadly diseases that devastated indigenous communities. By 1621, diseases brought by Europeans had killed over 90% of native people along the United States' present-day East Coast. But even after that loss, indigenous groups managed to rebuild themselves to a point where settlers began to see their strength as a threat. By 1637, in what's now Connecticut, colonists were fighting the Pequot Nation for control of trade. That year, settlers launched a massive attack on a Pequot village, killing men, women and children and burning people alive as they tried to escape. Between 400 and 700 Pequot people were killed in about an hour. After winning the Pequot War, the Massachusetts Bay Colony Governor John Winthrop declared a day of Thanksgiving. Some historians point to this event as the first Thanksgiving, but the US wouldn't make Thanksgiving a national holiday until 1863. In the centuries that followed, settlers continued to seize land, enslave indigenous people, and carry out violent campaigns of genocide, forced removal, and assimilation, often in the name of God and civilization. And that's why many indigenous people don't consider Thanksgiving a day of gratitude. Since 1970, they've observed a national day of mourning. Each year, many indigenous people gather in Plymouth, Massachusetts, the same place the English landed in 1620, to remember their ancestors and to honor the millions of indigenous people killed by colonizers over generations. So next time you think about turkey on Thanksgiving, remember the holiday's racist history and the true story indigenous communities have been keeping alive for generations.
So guys, this year, if you gather with your family, do it with awareness, do it with intention. Talk about the real history, honor native voices, support native creators, educators, and communities. Gratitude is beautiful. Erasure is not. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to catch you on the next one. For now, bye.